Veterans are some of the most respected individuals in the world, not because they took up arms and fired at command, but because they sacrificed their lives, interests, and goals to serve their nation through blood, sweat, and tears. Sir Lewis Nixon, famous for his portrayal in the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers, is one such veteran. He can never be forgotten in history. And here's why. Early life. Lewis Nixon's life began just like every other ordinary life. He was the grandson of a shipbuilder, Lewis Nixon I, and his grandmother, Sally Wood Nixon. At the age of 7, Lewis took third place in the Model Yacht Regatta at Conservatory Lake in Central Park on the 22nd of May, 1926. A model yacht regatta is a racing competition involving smaller, often radio-controlled, boats that resemble yachts. These boats are placed in a pond to see which will reach the end first. Lewis earned a gold and bronze medal, highlighting his tact and strategic approach from a young age. As a young adult, Lewis lived in New York City and Montecito, California. He loved to travel and explore, visiting places like Germany, France, and England. Lewis Nixon was born with a silver spoon, and reports allege that he did not let anyone forget that fact. He graduated from Cate School in Carpinteria. Then, he attended Yale University and participated in one of the most critical wars in history. Joining the military as an Ivy Leaguer with a comfortable background was not as difficult as expected. How did this journey turn out? Joining the military. Lewis Nixon was inducted into the United States Army on the 14th of January, 1941, in Trenton, New Jersey. He graduated from Army Officer Candidate School as an infantry second lieutenant in 1941. There he met Richard Dick Winters. Winters was selected to attend the Army Officer Candidate School in Fort Benning, Georgia, and was assigned to the 101st as a second lieutenant. They eventually become best friends. Lewis volunteered for the Parachute Infantry and was assigned to E Company, the 2nd Battalion, and the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, which Colonel Robert Sink commanded. The 506th was independent until 1943, when it became part of the 101st Airborne Division. Lewis did most of the regimental unit training at Camp Toccoa, Georgia. Then his pre-airborne training took place at Airborne School in Fort Benning. They trained in more locations within America, and by September 1943, he was sent with the 506th to Alborn, Wisconsin for a real invasion. He was appointed as the 2nd Battalion's intelligence officer and parachuted with the rest of his team to Normandy on the 6th of June, 1944. The E Company fought in the Battle of Carentan on the 12th of June that year. Lewis was adapting well to military life, and not long after his first battle, he was moved up to the regimental level. He served in Belgium, Germany, and the Netherlands, where a bullet from a machine gun hit him. The shot left a burn mark on his forehead, and not long after this traumatic experience, he developed a drinking problem. His colleagues knew him for celebrating before the end with alcohol. As a result, he was demoted back down to operations officer. His tactics and planning skills were still used on this level, but were not as visible. The demotion did not affect Lewis's drinking problem. What could stand between a man and his undying love for good whiskey? Lewis jumped with another regiment in 1945. On the 24th of March that year, Lewis Nixon was assigned by Major General Maxwell Taylor to observe with Major General William Miley's 17th Airborne Division during Operation Varsity. Lewis's plane got hit directly, and he survived narrowly along with 3 other soldiers. His training in airborne activity, combined with experience from active participation, earned him 3 combat jump stars on his jump wings. Regardless of his drinking issues, Lewis Nixon was a tough cookie. He was a part of the numerous military factions that brought about Germany's defeat and inadvertently ended the Second World War. He ended the war with the rank of captain and was on good terms with most of his soldiers. They were not called the Band of Brothers for nothing. They had each other's backs on the battlefield or in high offices. Lewis was first allowed to pick from an extensive captured wine collection in Berchtesgaden. This collection consisted mostly of bottles of liquor stolen from wineries across France and other European-controlled territories. Interestingly, Lewis Nixon claimed that he never fired a shot in combat, even though he spent most of the time on the front line. Some believe this was because his role was primarily as a staff officer and observer rather than a combatant. He was a planning officer and intelligence specialist, which meant he was more focused on strategizing and gathering information than engaging in direct combat. After the war, he returned home in 1945. He was different from the young Ivy League man with big dreams who had left the house years before. Lewis was a great military man and an even better captain. His peers mostly remembered him always having a source of whiskey, no matter where the company was. He had a special love for blended whiskey, VAT 69. He is also remembered for his role in 3 significant battles: Operation Market Garden, the Battle of the Bulge, and D-Day. How did all these go? Let's find out. Operation Market Garden. Operation Market Garden was a military operation during the Second World War. It was fought in the Netherlands, which the Germans occupied. From the 17th of September to the 25th of September, they raged on. The objective was on paper: create a salient spanning 64 miles into Hermann territory with a bridgehead over the Niederrhein to create an Allied invasion route into northern Germany. Operation Market Garden was called for a reason. The objective could only be achieved through the use of 2 strategies. The first involved seizing 9 bridges with a combined American and British airborne force, which was described as Market. The second involved British land forces immediately taking over the bridges, which earned the term Garden. It was during the realization of this strategy that Lewis Nixon almost got shot in the head. His helmet saved him from the impact. Battle of the Bulge. The Battle of the Bulge was popularly known as the Ardennes Offensive. It was the last major offensive campaign against the German army. It started from the 16th of December, 1944 to the 25th of January, 1945. The campaign began in the forests of Ardennes. Its objective was to stop Allied use of the Belgian port of Antwerp and split the Allied lines. This allowed the Germans to encroach on the 4 Allied armies and force the Western Allies to negotiate a peace treaty. The Battle of the Bulge started when German forces launched a surprise attack in the Ardennes region, pushing the Allied lines back and creating a bulge in their front, which led to the battle's name. Although the Germans temporarily pushed forward, they were ultimately defeated, and the battle is known as the U.S. Army's deadliest in the war. The battle involved intense fighting in brutal winter conditions, with heavy casualties. During the Battle of the Bulge, Lewis received a telegram informing him he had been selected to go to the States on a war bond drive. He didn't want to go. He told his friend, Dick Winters, that he could be replaced by another officer who was new and described as 2GI for the Easy Company. D-Day Battle. D-Day Battle was the largest seaborne invasion in history. The operation started in France and spread into the rest of Western Europe. This battle set the foundation for Allied victory on the Western Front. The invasion started right after midnight in the wee hours of June 6th. Over 24,000 American, British, and Canadian airborne troops landed that morning on the coast of France. The target was to invade 5 sectors of the Normandy coast: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. The placement was apt, but the wind was not whirling in their favor. The men landed under heavy fire from gun emplacements overlooking the beaches. The shore was mined and covered with obstacles such as wooden stakes, metal tripods, and barbed wire, making the work of the beach clearing teams difficult and dangerous. Omaha suffered the most casualties due to its high cliffs. Several towns suffered greatly from the battle as they were razed. Lewis Nixon was part of this battle. Dick Winters had given him a map detailing all the weapons positioned in Normandy. This map would change the fate of the Western Allies for good, so he ran 3 miles to Utah Beach to hand the map over to his superiors. They were more than excited to have that map in their hands. In appreciation of Lewis's help, they sent the first 2 tanks, the 101st, to Utah Beach to help his team. This secured his ride back to battalion headquarters. With the map in their possession, it was easier for them to take control of the 5 landing sites previously selected in Normandy. Regardless of this feat, the battle was tough on Lewis Nixon and his colleagues on the side of the Western Allies. German casualties were estimated to be around 4,000 to 9,000 men. The casualties on the Allied side were around 10,000 people. Over 4,000 people in that count were confirmed dead. Band of Brothers. Band of Brothers was a series developed in honor of soldiers like Lewis Nixon and the rest of the 101st Team who fought bravely in the wars and brought victory home on the backs of their torn, crusty uniforms, caked in soil and blood. Tom Hanks and Eric Jendresen developed the series. The duo invested time and energy in making sure the plot was detailed and mostly accurate. Steven Spielberg was described as the final eye. He passed an affirming check on most of the episodes. Steven Spielberg used his experience and insights from Saving Private Ryan to inform the creation of the Band of Brothers miniseries. Both Saving Private Ryan and Band of Brothers focused on the experiences of soldiers in World War II, particularly the brutal realities of war and the bonds formed among them. Accounts of Easy Company veterans were also used to achieve as much accuracy as possible. The plot of Band of Brothers might have been close to accurate, but it was still a dramatized version. It depicted the account of Easy Company's exploits throughout the war. It portrayed significant moments in the battle like their training at Camp Tokoa, the American airborne landings in Normandy, Operation Market Garden, the Siege of Bastogne, the invasion of Germany, the liberation of the Kaufering concentration camp, the taking of the Eagle's Nest in Berchtesgaden, their successful invasion of Germany, and the end of the war. The series carried the character of Richard Dick Winters as the lead character. His character worked with a commitment to accomplish the missions of the Easy Company and keep his men safe. The series generally focused on every character in the cast, ensuring that they were duly represented and their stories were told. The fate of every character was informed by the real-life people they depicted. Many passed away, and some sustained life-altering wounds. Some recovered and joined the team. Many returned psychologically changed. The story began with their first training in 1942 and wrapped up at the end of the war. The series covered the story of the D-Day battle, Operation Market Garden, and their history-altering moment as the first group to enter Adolf Hitler's mountain retreat in Berchtesgaden. The veterans alive during the making of this film might have hoped for accurate depictions, and Steven Spielberg did not disappoint them. Ron Livingston played Lewis Nixon's character. He rendered a stellar performance in his acting. The series was known to be the most expensive television miniseries ever created by any network. The budget per episode was an average of $12 million, and the general budget cost was estimated to be $125 million. Not to forget, an extra $15 million was used for promotions for the series. The significance of this location was not lost on the veterans and the viewers. It was the location where the U.S. troops had landed on the 6th of June, 1944. On the 7th of June, 2001, 47 Easy Company veterans were flown to Paris to be a part of the live premiere of the series. Chrysler sponsored the premiere and spent over $15 million on their advertising campaign for Band of Brothers. Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg carefully reviewed and approved every part of the series. The BBC paid over $10 million for a position as co-production partner and screened it on BBC Two. It did not air on BBC One because they wanted to allow an uninterrupted 10-week run. Some felt that the BBC was not broadcasting the series on its main channel because it was not mainstream enough. BBC denied it completely. Steven Spielberg and British Prime Minister Tony Blair had already reached an agreement, so all rumors were put to rest. The miniseries received many great reviews. It was nominated for 20 Primetime Emmy Awards and won 7. It also won the Golden Globe Award for Best Miniseries or Motion Picture Made for Television, the American Film Institute Award for TV Movie or Miniseries of the Year, and the Producers Guild of America Award for Outstanding Producer of Long-Form Television. CNN's Paul Clinton described the miniseries as a remarkable testament to that generation of citizen soldiers who responded when called upon to save the world for democracy and then quietly returned to build the nation that we now all enjoy and all too often take for granted. Karine James, an executive at the New York Times, described it as an extraordinary 10-part series that masters its greatest challenge, balancing the ideal of heroism with the violence and terror of battle, reflecting what is civilized and savage about war. She brought attention to the generation gap between the characters in the film and most viewers. Through this film, the gap of ignorance, heightened by the difference in generations, could be closed. Robert Bianco of USA Today rated the series a 4 out of 4 stars. He described it as significantly flawed, yet extraordinary. Philip French from The Guardian shared that he had seen nothing in the cinema in the past year that impressed him as much as Band of Brothers did. He praised it as one of the best films ever made about men in war, and claimed it was superior in many ways to Saving Private Ryan. Many also praised the production. Matt Seaton, part of the Guardian team, shared his thoughts on the series' production, saying it was on such a scale that in an ad hoc, inadvertent way, it gives one a powerful sense of what was accomplished during the D-Day invasion, the extraordinary logistical effort of moving men and material in vast quantities. Tom Shales at The Washington Post was perhaps one of the few people who vocalized their distaste for the series. He claimed that sometimes he found the series visually astonishing and thought it suffered from disorganization, muddled thinking, and a sense of redundancy. Of course, not everyone can like a film, but Tom's list of disapproval and negative critiques was longer than a family's shopping list for Christmas. He observed the characters, and his judgment was, few of the characters stand out strikingly against the backdrop of the war. This show is all backdrop and no front drop. When you watch 2 hours and still aren't quite sure who the main characters are, something is wrong. Lewis Nixon, Behind the Armor. Lewis Nixon was a friendly, easygoing man. Richard Winters described him as a free spirit who enjoyed the wild and partied with the best. Lewis made violence his absolute last resort. He never fired in the line of duty, even while his line of duty was right in the heat of the war. He was a keen observer and had some of the best war strategies ever. In a concentration camp at Landsberg, they witnessed the horrors of the Holocaust as innocent people were either shot or made to starve to death. The experience placed Lewis Nixon's mind in a different perspective, considering that he now knew what he was fighting for. His direct encounter with the Holocaust was not the only thing that changed something in the veteran's personality for good. He was given a whole alcohol storeroom to pick from, considering his love for liquor. Major Dick Winters found a reliable friend in Lewis, Damian Lewis, and Ron Livingston in Band of Brothers. Describing their friendship, Winters said, "On the surface, no two individuals were more opposed in temperament than Nixon and I. I was a confirmed teetotaler and never swore. I preferred a quiet evening in the barracks to the nightlife of Columbus, Georgia, or neighboring Phoenix City, Alabama. Despite the differences in lifestyle, I sensed we shared mutual feelings and ways of looking at life. I could understand him and help him understand me, as well as understand himself. Our friendship evolved naturally, and he soon became my closest friend." After the war, Lewis gave Richard Winters a job in his family company. Dick Winters worked at Nixon Nitration Works initially as a production supervisor, and eventually became the company's general manager. Their friendship was so long-lasting that Winters gave the eulogy during Lewis Nixon's burial ceremony. Lewis Nixon was not just a great soldier and master strategist, he was also a good friend and always protected the safety of the people he loved. Oh, despite this success, what really happened to Lewis Nixon? Let's find out. The personal life of Lewis Nixon. Media sources discovered Lewis Nixon's villa in France in the Côte d'Azur region through old newspapers. He allegedly inherited the house from his maternal grandmother and leased it to the Kennedys during the 1950s. The house had an entrance hall, a lounge, a dining room facing a gorgeous sea view, an office, a smoking room, a library, 6 bedrooms with bathrooms, a kitchen, a laundry room, and a wine cellar. Like that was barely luxurious enough, the sea built a swimming pool with a pavilion. The house was grand. Sadly, Lewis barely spent time there whenever he was in town. Sources disclosed that he would rather stay at Hotel Capistel than open the house. Of course, every grand home deserves grand maintenance, so maybe his avoidance is almost understandable. His romantic life was almost as chaotic as his personality. On the 20th of December, 1941, Lewis Nixon wedded Catherine Page. Richard Winters had seen and communicated with Catherine a few times, and she had not left a good impression. Judging Nixon's ex-wife, Winters had this commentary to give: Nixon had been married, but he had no love at home. I went to his house many times. He would invite me and a group of officers and company to his home on weekends. What I'm saying is not just from what he told me, but from what I observed of his married life. There was no love. Nixon did not have the burden of fear of not going back to his wife. When he got demoted to a lower battalion because of his alcohol struggles, he got a letter from his wife asking for a divorce and everything they had together. It wrecked Lewis psychologically. He dealt with his pain privately and continued to give his best during the war. He eventually met someone who truly loved him, Grace Umezawa. Lewis met Grace after the war in Edison, New Jersey. Lewis was working at his family business and had found love again with Grace. In 1956, they got married. For Grace, Lewis wanted to be a better man and partner, so he quit alcohol. Richard D. Winters was his best man at the wedding and passed the green check of approval on the union. Lewis and Grace lived at Grace's hilltop home in Sherman Oaks until he passed away. Lewis Nixon lived a long, fulfilled life and passed away on the 11th of January, 1995 from diabetes. He made his mark in history and secured his legacy at the battlefronts. What do you think about the veterans of Easy Company? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.